Hi, everybody. Christos Anesti. So, welcome to the second edition of
Annunciation Greek Coffee.
That's right, Annunciation Greek Coffee. And we had to make a little bit of a switch today. So next week we're going to be at Sweet Bakery at Vula Caseros' place. And so Peter Gines has graciously stepped in at the last minute. I called Peter, thank you very much. I called him up and said, do you mind if we come to Gines Restaurant? Everybody in our parish knows Gines Restaurant, so I thought that it's only fitting that we come here.
We like to say, Father, everybody dines at Gines.
Everybody dines at Gines. That's right. And I even had the opportunity to, learn the whole backstory between the J and the G. So I got that. That's a whole nother video. We're not even gonna talk about that. But we just finished having a great meal here. Most of you have eaten here. You know, Peter, how great your food is. And so, like I said, I just wanted to thank you for letting us be here. I thought it was interesting that, or helpful that, you can, you let us here, but also hopefully it's helping us advertise that you're here.
Well, I will say this: the priority is that you're here and that you're welcome to be here. We're welcome to have you here. If someone's out there isn't aware of Gines, maybe they know now. Great, but that's clearly not the priority. You're more than welcome here anytime.
And remember now, our audience is 6 or 7% Australia.
Okay.
And we've also got a presence now in the UK. So when they come here and travel, they're going to say, hey, I want to go to Gines.
You know what? They could also go to, I want to say the website's Live Rochester Webcam or something similar to that. If they Google that, okay, they can get a camera across the street, and they could also see the outdoors and see what it's like on Park Avenue on a beautiful summer day.
Awesome, and it's summer now, man. Really, it's good.
It's nice
it's good
out there.
All right, hey, again,
Enjoy.
I know we can't do that, but again, Peter, thank you very, very much for you and Amy letting us do this.
You're welcome. Glad to have you. Enjoy.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and get this kicked off. I think we might have some questions, but I was really excited about the questions that we had last week. They were really great questions. In fact, I've got one here that I had to do a little bit of research on, and so your questions have really been giving me the opportunity to kind of sharpen the sword, as they say. So, Demos, what do we have?
Well, let's start with your question, the one you received.
All right, I'm going to have to bring it up here. I've got it on the laptop. The term Lucifer in ancient Greece means light bringer. How did this transition to Satan? So, maybe a confusion of terms here. First off, it's important to understand that in the beginning, and I literally mean in the beginning, the opening words of Genesis, in chapter 3, we see now the devil being presented as the serpent. He's not called the devil, he's not called Satan, and so he's presented as the serpent who tempts. And later on in the book of Job, we see the person that will become Satan, and there he is the adversary, or he's the advocate. And the Hebrew term, and again just reading the Hebrew here, is Satan. And Satan is the Hebrew word then for an accuser, a prosecutor, or an adversary, somebody that is tempting then those people of God. So he didn't have this evil inclination yet, all right? Later on in Judaism, he takes on this, and in the book of Jubilees, we see him emerge as the person that we know today, which is Satan or the devil. Now, the term Lucifer actually is a Latin term, and that Latin term is from like luminary or lux, and that's light. And then the second, the ferer is, or luciferer, is then to bring. The actual term in Greek, so we've got Satan, which is Hebrew, we've got Lucifer, which is Latin, so it's the Greek term. The Greek term is is phos phoros. So phos, light, and phoro, to bring. So literally for us in Greek, the translation is now the bringer of light. And where we see this transition now into something that is more evil, we go to 2 Corinthians and we see Peter saying now, for such people are false apostles, deceitful, and no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. And it's not surprising that his servants, demons, will also then masquerade. So we see this idea of Satan or the devil emerging out of now early Judaism, post-Judaism, and then into Christianity.
All right. We have a question from Spiro. When we say, leave everything to the will of God, what exactly are they saying? What's the rational interpretation of this as we should apply it?
All right. So, what is the rational interpretation of leave everything to God, or leave it to the will of God? Now, we have to be very careful here because as Orthodox, we truly believe that the only self-limiting thing that God has ever done is to limit himself in terms of granting us free will. So for us, free will is a very important component because it allows us to separate ourselves from God. So as it says in the New Testament, they cannot be taken from my hand. That's true, but you can remove yourself. So in this sense, when we talk about the will of God, we don't want to deny now what is our will. And our purpose as Orthodox Christians is that we align our will with the will of God. We hear it in the Patrimon, we hear it in the Lord's Prayer. And thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So that is a single will. That's how we define, in fact, that's how we define this idea of Christ. He is of two natures, divine and human, but of one will. His will can only align with God. And that is the perfect theanthropos. That is the perfect man, and man, capital M. I'm not trying to be sexist here or anything. And so in that sense, what is the will of God? The will of God is what is good for us. Can we alter that will? Yes, absolutely we can, meaning that we can do something that is against God's will. So when people say, let it, act towards the will of God, they're right. We should do that, but we are not predestined or we are not forced into the will of God.
So Therese asks, Hi Father, in the book of Moses and Kings, did God order the Israelites to war against Philistines and other tribes for their salvation, meaning the salvation of the Philistines and other tribes?
Well, so Titi, good question, and to repeat the question, wow, okay, one more time.
In the book of Moses and Kings.
In the book of Moses and Kings.
Did God order the Israelites to war against the Philistines?
Did God order the Israelites to war against the Philistines?
And other tribes for their salvation, meaning that their salvation of the Philistines and other tribes.
And other tribes for their salvation. Okay. In the book of Kings and in the book of Samuel, the first and second Samuel, the Chronicles, we see a warring Israel, and we really shouldn't now pick up the fact that God is this idea of that he brings destruction upon those that don't do his will or that don't please him. And if we continue in that thought, then we are like Marcion. And Marcion was so obsessed with the idea that there is a killer God and an angry God. I'm just taking from The Simpsons because I love The Simpsons, right? Which one do you want, Todd? Angry God, happy God, right? Okay, so in this sense, Marcion thought there was an angry God in the Old Testament, and then he became reformed, and he became happy God in the New Testament, and that is the theory of Marcionism, and that was declared as a heresy. There's only one God, and that God acted out of out of love. And what we're supposed to get out of those books is to see whether we see them metaphorically or whether we see them actually. I'm talking about the Philistines and all of the others that attacked the ancient tribes of Israel. We see that more as to some extent a punishment now for having gone and worshipped other gods. And so what God is saying, you have turned away from me, and this is now what has come upon you. Just like us, when we turn ourselves away from God, many times there are bad consequences of that. Now, not that we're getting murdered, but turning away from God has its consequences. And this is really what we're supposed to pick up from those books, and not to get all drawn out about who is killing who. And in this case, it was always the situation where the people of Israel failed God, went off to worship others, and they suffered the consequence for that.
Anastasia says, "Hi, Father Angelo, Christos Anesti. Alan would like to know why Christ's childhood wasn't recorded in the Bible as his adult life was."
Ah, good question. Now, we do have one of those. So the question being, let me repeat the question again. Why don't we have information or stories about the childhood of Christ in the New Testament? So, there are some books that are not in the Bible. There are some letters that talk about Christ's childhood and some really interesting stories. But we really don't know the authorship of those. But let's get to the main point. What is the main point here? Is that the Bible is not a book of history. It's not like the Encyclopedia Britannica where you go, hey, I want to learn about X, and you pull the book off the shelf. The Bible has one specific purpose, is to reveal who God is and what we need to do to enter into God's love and into God's kingdom. That is the only purpose that the Bible serves, is to introduce us to God and who He is. So the early church said, knowing about Christ's childhood does not lead or does not help us towards salvation. So what is written in the Gospels about how we need to treat our brother, how we need to have a relationship with God, those things that can lead us off of the path to God, those are the things that are salvific for us, that lead us to salvation. And although interesting, the Gospel writers were not inspired to include now stories that would take us off of the purpose, which is how we can enter into God's love. Not that they're not important, but they are not important for our salvation.
Spiro is back. He asks, why is God so harsh in Leviticus?
The question is, why is God so harsh in Leviticus? Now, when you're talking about harsh, do you mean the commandments that he's offered? Meaning that all of the laws, he set down those laws just like in Numbers, Deuteronomy, that he's being strict there? Or do you mean in terms of he seems to be punishing now people? And again, I'd have to go back to my original statement to answer both of these questions. One is that we know that we worship a loving God, and that whatever was done, and this kind of relates back even to the first question about doing God's will. And God's will is always that we will, that if we do what is right in God's eyes, then we will not be rewarded, I don't want to use that term, but that we will live in God's mercy and God's love. From the standpoint of the rules that were created, again, when we are children, our parents don't give us deep explanations about why we need to do certain things. They don't walk us through the science of everything. What they do is they tell us, do not touch the stove, it's hot. They just give us a law, all right? And then once we do that, we find out, they don't explain to us how the principle of the burner works, and then how heat molecules are transferred through the burner to our skin, and what it does in terms of the nerve receptors. So remember, in the beginning, we were given the law because that, as St. Paul says, as children, that's what we were able to handle. Later on, now, when Christ comes, we are now grown up, so to speak, and now we can interpret those things on how and on why we should do that. The prohibition against eating pork. All right. You cannot eat pork. What did we find out later? That untreated pork can cause illness and can cause serious ailments. The 40 days that we have, we got from the Jewish tradition where the mother doesn't come to the church for 40 days. Now we have the science that says that the mother needs that 40 and the child needs that 40 days to build their immune system and also for the mother to recover. So those laws, although they seem strict at the time, in a child's eyes, they are strict, but when we have the science behind it, we understand why that is.
So, Andro asks on the how to dispose of blessed items videos. So, do Orthodox churches not have sacred sinks in the church?
Actually, so in terms of disposing of sacramental items, does the Orthodox Church have a quote-unquote sacramental sink? And we do. It's called a honeftidio, okay? So honevo means that, I take it in, all right? That I can absorb it, okay? A lot of times you'll hear a Greek say, meaning that I can't take that in. That's just wrong. So a honeftirion is a sink, but the drain pipe goes directly into the ground. And that way, everything sacramentally returns to the earth. If communion spills, we obviously inside, we need to clean that up. But if communion spills directly onto the earth, then it's not necessarily problematic. So we actually do have a sacramental sink. But there are certain things that, for practical purposes, can't be put down a sink. So let's say the Q-tips that I use for Holy Unction, this is a solid object. Okay, if I put that down the sink, it's going to clog up. That's why we have either burning or for liquids and things like that, we can put them then, we can dispose of them in the honeftirion. Every Orthodox church in the altar area where the altar boys are preparing and getting dressed and bread is prepared, there's a sink there. That sink normally will go directly to the earth.
#angry asks in response to your Lent video, can an unbaptized person follow Lent, specifically for people who believe in the religion but are not yet baptized?
So can an unbaptized person follow the Lenten period? Okay, and there was something else with that, or no?
Well, specifically for people who believe in the religion but are not yet baptized.
Lent, sorry. Fasting and the practice of Lent has nothing whatsoever to do with what your status is, okay? The fasting period and the Lenten period is a time of preparation. And in fact, in the early church, it was exactly for those people who were not baptized. So they were preparing themselves and they were being catechized in the church. Remember, in the Orthodox liturgy, when you hear the doors, right? Okay, now it doesn't really have the meaning that it did, but originally, what was that meaning? That meaning was, this is the time when the liturgy of the word is over. We need to collect all those people who are preparing for illumination, baptism, and they need to get out of the church because now we're entering the liturgy of the Eucharist and they're not ready to receive that. So actually, the Lenten period was exactly the time when these candidates were preparing themselves for holy illumination, and those baptisms were happening at Pascha. Now, this tradition now is celebrated very predominantly in the Anglican Church and in the Episcopal Church. You'll see that they will be preparing their communicants for that period during Pascha, and then on that Paschal Eve, or they'll have then all of them come forward, and they will receive then the sacrament of baptism.
In response to the video, can Orthodox priests marry? Christy asks, what do you mean when you say that you're from Alpha Centauri?
So so in one of my videos, I had mentioned that I was actually from Alpha Centauri. This is actually a true statement. My parents don't have an actual birth record for me, and when I was ordained, the church asked to see my baptismal record, and the document that they produced was a forgery, and they were able to take small amounts of kryptonite off of the edge of the paper, and so my true nature was actually revealed. But since then, I have converted from my Alpha Centauri roots to now Orthodoxy.
Andrew asks in response to the how to dispose of blessed items. We already did that. Never mind.
Okay.
So the next question is from Carmelita on the original sin video. What does the sins of our fathers mean?
In the which video?
Original sin video.
Oh, in the original sin video, what does the term "the sins of our fathers" mean? Okay. There is in some Jewish circles the idea, and you see this also then in the New Testament also, that what the family does, those sins can be carried ancestrally on through the family, meaning that what it is that I do then will carry over, and those sins will be then carried into my progeny, my offspring. Okay. Now, and you especially see this during the trial of Jesus. And you'll hear the people say, and his blood will be on our children. All right, and so you see that very Judaic idea. In Christianity, we don't really have this idea, other than a practical idea of, let's say that you had some type of you were a drug addict or something like that, or an alcoholic. Could you pass that sin on to certainly from a scientific standpoint, you can pass that along. But that's really the only way that we see this idea of the sins of the fathers then tainting us. Each one of us is a separate and unique creation made in the image and likeness of God, and we are unique. And what we do is not then carried over from our parents, except for, those medical issues that I mentioned before.
And hair.
Oh, and yes, and yeah, and hair. And that is the sin of my father. He's given me now his hair. Yes, exactly.
Dan Nelson asks, can you bless your house by burning old blessed palm?
Can you bless your house by burning of old palms from Palm Sunday? The answer to that is no. The act of burning is just that. It is the act of taking that sacramental item and disposing of it properly. You don't obviously want to throw it in the trash. But any sacramental thing that we do, and especially blessings, come with a specific prayer. So we want to really be careful that we don't tie our sacraments just to a thing, like a fire burning that gives it power. These things are all creations. They have no power in of themselves. The power comes from the actual prayer itself. Now, why do we use these elemental things? Because Christ used them. He used water, he used earth, he used he obviously used air. So he uses those things and he sanctifies them. But if we are going to bless something, we have to have the prayer of blessing, and then we have to have some material thing that will transfer that blessing, if I can use that term. Oil, water. This is why we bless with water, right? Or if you have nothing else, air, because literally you take the cross and as you go through the house, then you just actually bless the house. But the actual burning, the fire itself, is not part of the blessing.
Someone named Terry just asked, is it a sin to be an alcoholic?
The answer is no. Oh, is it okay? The question was, is it a sin to be an alcoholic? The answer is no. It is not a sin to be an alcoholic. Now, we remember the church, the Orthodox Church, sees herself as the hospital. And as Jesus said, I did not come to heal those that are well, I have come to heal those who are sick. All right. So the church always sees whatever the addiction is as an illness that has clouded that image and likeness of God, and that needs to be repaired. All right. The acts of the alcoholic can be the sin: beating of their spouse, rude behavior, cursing, getting into fights. Those actions of the addict can be sins, but the addiction itself is not a sin.
Orthodox Unlimited demands to know, where is your cassock?
So I have been called out because I don't have my cassock on. Wow, how do I answer that? Well, actually, technically, that's who? Ultimate Orthodox?
Unlimited.
Unlimited. Orthodox Unlimited. You are right. There's nothing that I can say. What I'm wearing right now, there we go. Okay. What I'm wearing right now is of Roman Catholic persuasion. All right. It is not in any way the Orthodox uniform. I should be wearing the cassock. However, different bishops have different policies. It is the policy of our particular bishop that when we are out in public, that we are careful in how we present ourselves so that we are understood. And in Russia or in Greece, wearing the cassock, everybody knows who you are. It makes sense. But here in America, our bishop believes that this is what is really well known in America as the sign of Christianity among Protestants and among Catholics. And for us to wear the robe then can become confusing to those that are non-Orthodox, and he feels that we are not then witnessing to the faith as we should. The idea is not to be a clanging gong where I wear it just because I feel cool, but am I truly evangelizing to those? When you see me do the videos in the church, I always wear the cassock because that's where that cassock belongs. We are amongst those who know why we wear the cassock.
VDMA asks, does the Orthodox Church combine the body and the blood of Christ together, meaning that there is no chalice of just the blood being distributed?
So, question is in the Orthodox service, the Divine Liturgy, is the body, the particles of the bread, then commingled with the wine in the cup, so that the chalice that is presented has both elements in it? The answer is yes. So we do not have either the Protestant or the Catholic idea of the separation of species, as we call them. Now, in the original and ancient church, the Orthodox Church, just like the Catholic Church, presented the body separately from the blood in the chalice. But currently speaking today, only clergy in the Orthodox faith can receive under separate species. Then after all the clergy have received, then the proto-presbyter or the celibate priest will commingle those into the cup and then distribute those to the communicants. And there is no such thing as just wine in the chalice when it's received by the laity.
All right. Alan asks, Father Angelo, with the virus that is currently spreading like wildfire, are you and your parishioners concerned about the epidemic? And if any of your parishioners caught the virus, what would you recommend for any of your sick parishioners? My hope is that neither you or your parishioners get it.
Okay. So, and to repeat the question again, give me the beginning of the question again.
With the virus spreading like wildfire, are you and your parishioners concerned about the epidemic? And if any of them caught it, what would you recommend they do?
So, are we concerned about the epidemic? Absolutely. The churches are closed. That's your statement right there. So we have not gone against what our archdiocese has not gone against what the state government has said. And they have said that we must remain closed. So are we concerned? Absolutely. And that's why now these churches are closed. There are some that have said, well, that's a poor demonstration of the faith, and you're not standing up for who you should be, and you're just cowards and you're scared. Well, that's not the case at all, because again, even Jesus Christ himself said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. We are allowed to obey the law. We are supposed to obey the law. Now, what are we doing about that? Closing the churches until we can see this decline, as our governor has said and laid out the principles. Now, would we be concerned, or what is our strategy opening up? We will have a strategy, as all of the other metropolises in America are developing right now. And what would we do with those people who had COVID? We would absolutely tell them that they have to remain home. For the safety of our parishioners, they have to remain home. So we don't want to look at the communion, at the body and blood of Christ, as something that we are going to then tempt God with. That if I have COVID and I receive it, then I will be cured. This is not what our theology tells us. All right. So we're going to have very strict policies that when we begin to reopen, the first thing will be to check people for their temperature. And if their temperature is above what the stated value is, then we will make the assumption that they have some type of flu or something like that, and we will err on the side of caution, and we will ask them politely to go home.
We have a question here. From Jonas. I have a question about during the part of right before the reading of the Nicene Creed. Why do you raise the cloth that covers the holy gift? What is it? What is the symbolism?
Okay. So what is the symbolism of raising the aer, that's what that's called, the aer, A-E-R, over the chalice and the discos, and then I shake it, all right? And what's the symbology of that, all right? Now, a lot of this stuff is wrapped up in myth and legends and things like that. But at seminary, at Holy Cross, what we were told is that during the occupation by the Ottoman Empire, by the Turkish Empire, the Orthodox churches were allowed to maintain their liturgies, but they always had to maintain that the government that was in control was the supreme, the caliph was the supreme ruler. Okay, and so there was a prohibition against saying the creed. All right, and so what the priest would do is that he would hold the air up, and on it was written the creed. And he would hold this up so that all the congregation could see it, and he would shake it, and this told the people, when I shake this, I want you either silently or very in a low voice to actually recite the creed. So what it was the signal in the times of the occupation for us to be able to recite our creed, which tells us what it is that we believe and that we do not believe then in the Nation of Islam.
Anderson asks, does the Orthodox Church believe in the necessity of being born again?
Does the Orthodox Church believe in the necessity of being born again? The answer is yes and no. Okay, so as Jesus said to Nicodemus, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven unless you are born again. And then he said, well, how would I go back into my mother's womb? So for us, to be born again is baptism. So you are born from the womb, okay? And then at some point in time, you will then be brought so that you may take off the old flesh and put on the new. Now, in Orthodoxy, remember, we never, ever, ever once say for the removal of original sin. We don't have the concept of original sin. We don't believe in original sin. You don't get anything transferred. But what we do believe is that at the time of baptism, you are born again into a new life, into the Christian faith. Once you have been born again, in that baptism, there is only one baptism for the remission of sins. Now, are you going to sin after you get baptized? I'm telling you right now, you will. And if you don't think you're going to sin again, well, then you don't understand Christianity. So, what do we do now? We've been given this brand new white garment. What do we do now that we've sinned, that we've tainted it? That's why we retain the sacrament of confession and of penance, because and a weekly liturgy, which in some sense renews that white baptismal garment. But in the Orthodox faith, remember that you cannot receive communion unless you are on a regular cycle of confession. Now, I know that unfortunately in the Greek Orthodox Church, confession is not really a big thing, and we can talk about why that is, okay? And I got that straight from Monathos, so I know the answer is right. And so in that sense, every liturgy for us is a cleansing. So we can be born again through that confession and penance. So for us, it makes no sense whatsoever to redo your baptism, to say that it didn't take the first time. The Nicene Creed, the Apostolic Creed are very clear. One baptism for the remission of sins. So we absolutely don't see any biblical evidence why you would be born again several times. But we do see you being born again through the sacrament of confession and then of returning to the cup and receiving the body and blood of Christ.
Timothy Connolly has an issue. Why does everything have to be Greek to you guys? Why not Orthodox Christian? Greece and Greeks are not so Orthodox anymore, only on a tribal level.
So why do we have to be so G? That G is the term I like to use. Why do we need to be so G, so Greek? All right. Well, let's start. Let's get something clear first. All right. The Greek in the Greek Orthodox is not meant to indicate a language. Well, I'm sorry. It is meant to indicate a language, but the lingua franca. So we have Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox. How do you refer to the Church of the West? Roman Catholic. Okay. Are you Italian to be Catholic? No. All right. But in the East, how do you refer to those Christians? As Greek Orthodox. There is much confusion that the Greek in Greek Orthodox means that this is where Greeks gather for worship. In fact, the number one question that I have from converts is, do I need to be Greek or do I need to speak Greek to be a member of your church? And the answer is, of course not. No way. You don't need to be Greek. But the New Testament, the lingua franca of the time in the East was Greek. So we at Annunciation are Greek Orthodox. The Romanian church is Romanian Greek Orthodox. So on and so forth. So we have to understand the Greek and Greek Orthodox. In my last parish, when we were building the new church, that was a question that came up. And they said, Father, do we have to put Greek Orthodox, Assumption Greek Orthodox Church? Can't we just say Assumption Orthodox Church? And the answer is no, because the Greek Orthodox ties us to a Byzantine tradition. It ties us to Constantinople. If we say Orthodox Church, then we're talking about OCA, and we are tied to the Russian church, the old Russian church. So that Greek Orthodox tells you that when you come into our church, you will see a Byzantine-style liturgy. When you go to a Orthodox church that just says Orthodox, you're probably going to get a Russian style. When you go to a Romanian Greek Orthodox church, you will see then in Romanian. So we do have cultural elements that seep into our liturgy, and that sign out front tells you what those are. But in no way does it mean that you have to be Greek to be Greek Orthodox.
James Rockford asks, is it true that God is made out of wine, bread, and water? I thought God was a spirit. Is there a recipe in the Bible?
So is God made out of bread, wine, and
Water.
bread, wine, and water?
And is there a recipe?
And is there a recipe in the Bible for, quick start on how to make God? All right. And the answer to this is obviously no. Remember what I said earlier tonight. We use the example of Christ himself. Christ used the elements of the earth when he performed his healing miracles. He used water, he used spittle, he used the clay from the ground, all right? So he used elements within, and he also then used bread, okay? The multiplication of the loaves and the fishes, all right? So all that we're doing in our Orthodox service is giving back to God what he gave us, okay? So, and there's the beautiful line, the absolutely beautiful line in our liturgy when we say, thine own of thine own we offer to you in all and for all. And that's a lovely statement because it says thine own of thine own. So I'm holding up the bread and the wine and the water, all right? And I'm saying, you are the ones that made this possible. But we as men, capital M again, we took it and we transformed the wheat and the grapes and all of that into something. We turned it into bread and we turned it into wine. And we take that and we offer it back up to you. So there's this wonderful interplay here of God's given us the talent and the raw material. We have transformed that raw material into a product, and we've now given it back to him. And all we ask is that in the consecration, we say, send down your Holy Spirit upon us first, right? Send down your Holy Spirit upon us, and then upon these gifts. And so it's not just about this voodoo act of transforming now what's in the cup, because the words are, send down your Holy Spirit upon us. And so we feel that these elements now have been imbued with the Spirit of God. Okay, and truly the person or the hypostasis, which is now the Holy Spirit. So for us, this is not like a recipe or anything like that. This is now elements that Jesus Christ himself and God used, and now we're returning those to him.
Makis asks about the mock troll. Here in Greece, churches burn the old dirty ones and buy new very often, because the remains of dirt on the cloth are from the Holy Communion. We do not wash the mock troll.
All right, so the mock that he's talking about is the red communion cloth, okay? And so the question being, what is it?
Makis in Greece says that that in Greece they actually burn them, they don't wash them, like you demonstrated in your video.
All right, how am I going to put this now? All right, so we in America are very Scottish in our thinking, meaning that we're very cheap, okay? And so we hate waste in any form, okay? And the maktra, the cloths, are, they're not cheap. And so we have, at least our bishops here have given us the ability to be able to clean those cloths. Now, how are those cloths cleaned? We don't just take them and throw them in a washer and off we go. When I wash them or I give them to somebody, a trusted parishioner, to wash, they will take it in a clean, brand new clean bucket, and they will wash them there, and then all of that water will be returned directly to the earth. It doesn't go down the drain or anything like that. So when they wash the cloths, they wash them in soap and water, and then the soapy water and the rinse water are all poured directly into the earth. And that's why I use only trusted people who I know will do what I ask them to do. Now, if a cloth gets too stained or too dirty, then I will do exactly what it is that you've said. Is we'll have once a year, we'll have a burning, and then all of the palm crosses from the last year and all of the other sacramental items that I have that need to be burned, I will put the communion cloth, the makta, in with those, and I will burn it. But we will make sure that we get the maximum amount of use in a very Scottish way of making sure that we get value.
Matt R. Asks, and this is in response to your sermon from last week about Jesus being the Son of God. He says, in John 4, it reads, the woman said to Jesus, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will show us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. John 4:25-26. But I don't get where Jesus said that he is the Son of God in the passage. What do I see? He says he is the Jewish Messiah. Being God and Jewish Messiah are two separate things.
So, so again, and I know that's long, rather long question. I'm not going to remember all of it, but in my sermon last week, I talked about how Jesus has called himself I said that it is false that Jesus never proclaimed himself as God, and I used the text of the Samaritan to show that. And in that, and the actual, and oh boy, I wish I had the text directly in front of me, because whenever we're doing Bible quoting, and it is John
4.
Um,
25-26.
John 4, 25. Okay. All right. And 20. Okay. So, 26. Verse 25, the woman said, I know that the Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Verse 26, Lego afti, I say, or he said to her, Oizus ego imi olalonsi. So, what we have here in verse 26 is leyafti oisus. O Isus is Christ, right? Jesus said to her, ego imi. For us as Orthodox, the ego imi is the name of God. It is the only name that God used for himself. When Moses went to the mountain, and he said, when I go and I tell them that the Lord sent me, what should I tell him your name is? And he says, I am that I am. And so any time that ego imi, I am, is said, we as Orthodox take that to mean that he is using the name of God. And this is what caused him so many problems, is because the Jews at the time knew that that term is the name that God gave himself. And now here is this prophet, so-called prophet, using that name. So are you correct in saying, Christ and Messiah is the same term, but that a Messiah doesn't necessarily mean God? You are correct. But when you read the words and it says, Jesus Christ said, ego imi, I am, we as Orthodox see that as a direct indication that he's calling himself God because he's using the name of God.
Nikki Chamberlain asks,
Okay.
What happens to those that pass away and believe in reincarnation? What happens to their souls since they are not Christian and don't believe in Jesus?
Wow. So the question being, what happens to those people that die, are not Christian, and believe in reincarnation? All right. So you will never hear, again I say, you will never hear a canonical Orthodox priest ever say that a person is going to heaven or a person is going to hell during a funeral service. We're not allowed to say it because that is the mind of God. So I, in a funeral service, can never say, and now he rests in heaven, or thank God he's going to hell. The Orthodox priest cannot say that because we don't know. That's the answer we give for those who believe in reincarnation and other things that are not Christian is, and to be somewhat crude, good luck with that. So we will never say that you are outside of God's mercy or grace. But we do say that at the time of judgment, you will be judged for what it is that you believe. And as Orthodox Christians, the only thing we know for sure is that those who confess Christ will be saved. Now, as Orthodox Christians, that's what we believe. But we would never say to that person, well, you're going to hell because you're a reincarnationist. I made a noun there, right? But we'll just say, we hope that you see the light, but we cannot say how you will be judged by God.
Henry Thornton asks, how did there come to be such a stark difference in the veneration of Saint Joseph the Carpenter between our faith and the Catholic Church?
Okay, how did there come to be what, a difference?
A stark difference in the veneration of Saint Joseph between.
So the question being, why is there this stark differentiation between Joseph the Carpenter, Jesus's earthly father, if we can say that, all right, and from an Orthodox perspective and a Catholic perspective? I guess again I would have to research this from the Catholic perspective, but we see Joseph as a man who was a protector of the Virgin Mary. We don't necessarily see him as having the salvific role that Mary had. He is a fairly minor character. We don't know if he was Jesus' teacher. I mean, he was the father. We don't know what that relationship is. So for us as Orthodox, I can only speak for right now for Orthodox, I'd have to research the Catholic perspective, but we see two most important things about Joseph. One, that he did not cast her away. He could very well have cast her away from the perceived sin that she committed, but he did not, and he took her in and he took care of her according to that Jewish tradition, where he could have put her aside. And the second thing that's most important to us is we see that Joseph's initial thought was, I don't know whether or not Mary's telling me the truth. And we read that he was then tempted to believe that this was Mary cheating on him, if you want to call it that. But what ended up happening was an angel of the Lord came to him and told him, no, what Mary carries is for the salvation of the world. So he was gifted with the ability to know the coming then of the Messiah, the coming of God. But other than that, he is a fairly minor character for us within the Orthodox faith.
John Dides just donated $25 thanking you for hosting these chats, saying that they're very informative and help to explain the Orthodox Church and her traditions.
Well, John, thank you very, very much. By the way, John is one of the chanters, along with Lori Wooder-Sores, who has been chanting for us throughout this entire time. So those of you that have been tuning in to our Sunday liturgies and certainly through Holy Week, you've had a chance to see John and Lori chanting there with Lori's husband David in the background doing a wonderful Eson. So John, again, thank you for the obviously the $25, but also thank you more importantly for the dedication and love that you give to your home church.
Anastasia asks, is there a devil and can he possess people?
So, is there a devil? If we believe that there is God, then we do believe that there is the devil. If we believe in heaven, then we believe that there is a hell. And again, we had that discussion, and there's a video coming out where we talk about this idea of an involvement of how hell became hell, so to speak. So, can the devil? Second question: can the devil possess us? Only if we allow it. He has no power over us. Now, the movies will tell us otherwise. The movies will show him as this very terrifying individual that can absolutely control us like a vampire, and that we become his zombie, and then we're going to do his will. All right? And I think the better portrayal of Satan for us is, what's the movie? Michael Douglas, The Advocate?
Devil's Advocate.
Devil's Advocate. That really is the truer picture of Satan. Satan, again, was an angel of light. Okay, so he was one of the more powerful angels, and so he is very dazzling, and he is very persuasive, and from what we saw in the Garden of Eden. He has no power to possess us. He only has the power to influence us. And that's what happened in the Garden of Eden, is that we became influenced. But he did not have any direct control. So he and his demons have no ability to control us. We can't be hexed by somebody. It's only what we allow. And so when people come to me and they say, "Father, I feel like I'm being possessed. What do I, again, are there some indications of possession? The Orthodox Church absolutely believes that, but they believe that came through the fact that the person let that demonic activity come into them, and they did not repel then that activity.
By the way, that was Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves, not Michael Douglas.
Oh, not Michael Douglas. Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for correcting me. Demos is our movie buff, so I just love movies. I'm not really good at getting the facts straight.
Well, we have one last question.
Okay.
This one's from David T. What happens if you drop the chalice with the precious body?
I am instantly fired. All right. Go find somebody that's not a klutz. All right. Question. Sorry. The question is, what happens if during the distribution of Holy Communion, that I drop the chalice? All right. Kind of, I'll back up here a little bit. Remember, the only time that the chalice and the paten being the disc, all right, are critical is after the consecration. That's when the priests or the bishop must be very, very careful with the distribution of communion. So just a quick story here. In my very first parish in Kalamazoo, I was serving my second liturgy, and we were coming out to do the great entrance. All right. At the great entrance, it's bread and it's wine. And so I was holding the gifts up and pandonimon, right? And I'm walking through, and for some reason, I tilted them forward, and everything that was on the paten slid right onto the floor. All of the bread slid onto the floor. And you heard this collective gasp in the church. Oh my God, what's he going to do? And all I did was I reached down and I picked up as many of the crumbs as I could, and I put them up. And I told them, it's only bread. It's just bread. Now, back to your original question, what happens if now it falls on the floor? All right? If it falls on marble, then I have the ability to just mark off that area, keep everybody away from it, finish communion, and then after that, and I'm not kidding on this, after that, I am supposed to then go down and lick up as much as I can. and then clean it several times. But I must first then, by myself, as much as I can, is clean that off of the floor myself personally, and then I can wipe it up. If it spills on a carpet, then same thing. I have to isolate that area, okay? And then after liturgy, I cut out a square where we believe that the communion fell, and then that piece of carpeting is burned. That's why in an Orthodox church, if you walk around, you look very carefully where they distribute communion. If it's a carpeted church, you'll see these little teeny squares, and you'll wonder, what's that all about? And that's what that is communion has spilled, they've cut it out, they've burned it, and that's why we always keep extra carpeting on hand so that we can repair it.
All right, that's it.
Okay, so again, thank you everybody. That Demos, I don't know, what do you think? That was some great questions on there. The questions are getting more and more difficult. Oh my goodness! After this, I'm going to want a PhD or a degree or something like that, or I'm just going to have to lie better. I don't know which one. I'm kidding. But me personally, I really enjoy this, and I definitely enjoy being in parishioners' restaurants, showing off what it is that they're doing. Last week, Cafe Macchiato. This week we're at the Giants restaurant. We're really looking forward to all the restaurants opening up. Next week we think that everything's going to be fine, and Vula's going to have us in at Sweet Bakery right downtown on Monroe Avenue. So until next week, Christos Anesti, and I look forward to seeing you all.